I'm Lloyd Holiday, and this is the Cost of a Thing podcast. Thanks for listening in today. The cost of a thing is the amount of time that you must spend working to buy the things that you want and need. And that directly determines your standard of living. And the American standard of living is what this podcast is all about. And I'm going to be discussing anything that affects that standard of living, especially those things that affect it negatively, and especially those things that have lowered our standard of living from the one that we had in America here in the 1960s, which was better than the one today. And why am I doing this, talking about our standard of living? Because I've been there when it was better than it is now. I've seen how it was in the 1960s and 70s, and it was better in general for more people. And I don't see the government talking about this, trying to improve the standard of living. I don't see the media talking about this. It's either ignored or it's forgotten, and it may be purposely ignored. So that's why I want to bring these things out. I want to bring attention to the fact that our standard of living has gone down and is going down. And that's what I'm going to talk about right here on the Cost of a Thing podcasts. Okay, a special report today. I am at ground zero for the world's first intentional power outage to stop fires, wildfires. This is the PG&E has shut off power, and I'm in the right in the center of that area where they're doing it. So I'm going to give you a little report of how it was to be in that and what happened and what I saw and some of my other thoughts on that. Power in my area here in California went off at around 1 a.m. on Wednesday, the 8th of October. And it came back on last night about 9 p.m. So it was almost out for 2 days. I figure about 42 hours or something like that. Maybe 45 hours. So it's back on now. But that's quite a lengthy time to go without power. And very few people were prepared for this. A lot of people suffered losses. If they had big refrigerators full of meat in their freezer, or that all melted away the first day, and they lost all their meat. If they couldn't get a generator, a lot of people didn't. You couldn't get any generators because once something like this happens, everybody goes to stores, buys all the available generators. And if you didn't have a generator, you probably weren't going to get one. So I'll talk a little bit about what I saw around the area here where the power outages were. Walmart in the area closed on Wednesday, but then on Thursday they got a big generator in there somehow, and they got the whole store back up. And they didn't have everything stocked like it normally is, but it was back in business. The refrigerators and freezers were all working again. And there's another grocery store in town. It did not have a generator, and it looks like when I went in there, they were open, but they were only selling the dry goods, the things that didn't need refrigeration. There was no meat, no deli department, very little produce, only the produce like apples and oranges and stuff, cabbage that don't really need refrigeration. The other stuff wasn't there. They had, of course, all the canned goods and the dry cereals and things like that, and other things. Just basically the meats and things like that weren't there. They had to pull them. It looked like they pulled everything out. I was in the store. They didn't have any lights on except a couple because they had a small generator running enough to run the registers. And I give them a good thumbs up for trying to stay open, and people could still get food there on Wednesday. And, it's quite a hardship on grocery stores and on people who didn't have any generators. Their refrigerators would just melt out, and A lot of people probably lost their meat if they didn't have a backup generator to run that refrigerator or freezer. Some people keep a lot of meat. Probably lost a lot of meat. The fast food restaurants probably lost some of their meats and stuff. I don't know how they dealt with it. But they were all closed in town. The gas stations were closed. And the pumps wouldn't work. City offices were closed. The postal offices, the postal place I go was closed. So everything was pretty much closed except the first day, except that one grocery store that had just the dry goods and stuff. So it was really like something you'd probably see if there was a major war or something and we were under attack. It was really something to see. The lights, all the traffic lights were out. They were just dead. And then they would have a little stop sign the cops put up there, like a little stand that said stop, most of the big ones. But no traffic lights, no street lights, no nothing. It was just dead. A lot of the schools, of course, the schools were closed. I noticed they were out. And outside, anybody that had a generator, you could hear the hum of dozens of generators going in all different directions around you. Lots of people running generators, and I could smell barbecues, people cooking outside because they got electric cooking inside, couldn't cook there. So a lot of barbecuing was going on. I had never seen anything like this in my life. I've never seen power intentionally cut, and I've never even had power off that long due to weather, that knocked the power lines down or things like that. So I'd never experienced this in my entire life. Okay, so how did I get through it? How did we get through it here in my family, at my house here? Well, we were totally unprepared for the whole thing, and I think there was some notification by text message or something to somebody's phone a day or so before they cut the power off that they might do it, but it wasn't like it was a sure thing, and we thought, well, maybe we're not really in the area, so we really didn't think they were going to do it. So we were totally unprepared, but we got through it okay with a minor inconvenience of having the power out because we had a lot of luck. We had some things that helped us get through it a lot more easily. And these were some things, a lot of people probably did not have these things and they had a much tougher time. But I'll talk about those in a minute. And then we had some natural things that allowed us to get through it a lot easier, and that was just by total luck. It happened to be in October, and the weather here is great in October. It was the highs about 75 degrees, the lows about 50. So you really didn't need any heating or air conditioning. And another thing that happened that was just really by total luck is that the water system in our area worked even though the power was out. So we had water. And also by luck, our water heater is a gas-powered water heater, doesn't need electricity at all. So we had hot water and all the water we needed. So that made it a lot easier. I know if some people are on wells or things like that, they need electricity to run that well. Their water was also off. So there's a lot of people like that around too. So that would have been a lot more trouble if there was no water also. And the one final thing that made it a lot easier for us is I happen to have an RV, which on it is a generator, an electrical generator. So, we were just able to go out there and fire up the generator and, cook dinner. We only ran it while we were cooking dinner for maybe 15 minutes or something like that. But, that helped. A lot of people, of course, like I said, no generators, so they didn't have that option. And if you're cooking as electric stove, well, you're going to have trouble there unless you've got some kind of a camp stove or something like that to cook on. And one more thing that the RV really helped with, and if you know anything about RVs, it's got what they call house batteries. And ours has two 6-volt batteries that chain together and add up to 12 volts. So, and I've got solar panels on the roof that charge those batteries, keep them charged up. So we had that. And what that does is then there's an inverter, power inverter in the RV that changes it from 12 volt to regular 110 house current. So I just plugged a line from my inverter on my RV and ran it in the window of the house, and I was able to power up some lights and the internet, and if we wanted to watch TV, we had that. So that was some things that made it a lot easier at night for us. It was almost like there wasn't a power outage because, we just ran with less lights on, and it made it much easier. If you didn't have that, you were just in the dark unless you had flashlights or you had no power. These things made it much easier. Even though we were unprepared, we, used our resources to get us through it as easy as possible, and probably much easier than most people who don't have an RV, who don't have a generator, don't have the solar panels with the battery backup. And I know other people were not lucky on that, and they probably really suffered. Maybe they didn't even have a flashlight. We carried lots of flashlights. We had that because we go camping and RVing a lot, so we keep a lot of flashlights. But some people don't even keep maybe one flashlight. We carry a lot of extra batteries. We're kind of prepared for that kind of thing, but very few people have RVs. But they did have the water, and if they had a gas water heater, they had hot water, and that probably helped a little. But I'm sure hundreds of thousands of people lost all their food that they had in the refrigerator that was perishable. And who knows how much that's worth, probably millions of dollars just down the drain. You couldn't go to a fast food joint because they're closed. So basically they probably went down to the grocery store and got some soup or something, or maybe they had some stuff stored up like we kind of had some. We keep a week or two's food around, and we're probably going to start carrying a month or two's food around, just in case. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about the weather here in our area. It's Northern California, kind of a mild climate. In the summer, it gets kind of hot and sometimes windy. And in the winter, it's kind of rainy, but still mild. The highs are in the 50s, and the normal highs in December and January. But these winds, I've been here more than 20 years, these winds are typical. 50, 60 mile an hour dry north winds are common here. This happens probably every couple months for a couple of days. It's part of the cycle. It'll blow from the north for a couple of days, and then it'll be calm for a few, and then it'll blow in from the south for a few days. A little bit, kind of a cycle like that, from the north, and then it comes back from the south. I know the cycle. I've seen it the whole time I've been here. And low humidity this time of year and in the summer is normal. It is absolutely normal. So I'm trying to set this up so you kind of understand the weather situation out here a little bit. Then I'm going to go into why they design their systems the way they do given these weather conditions. So in engineering, you design a system, any system. This is just common sense even, really. You don't even have to be an engineer. But you design a system for the worst case scenarios within reason that happen. And certainly normal typical weather that occurs every 2 or 3 months should be designed into these electrical systems. And it looks like it's not. It looks like of course, PG&E, the electric company, Pacific Gas and Electric, they absolutely know about these weather conditions here. And why they're not designing their systems to take into account for these weather conditions is beyond me. We never used to have fires caused by electrical lines that I know of. I mean, I've been in California most of my life and I've seen a lot of fires. Most of them are started by lightning or arson or a car backfiring or somebody's campfire getting out of line. It's just been lately I've seen these arcing, they call it arcing power lines, where the power lines they get in such a sinusoidal swing from the wind that they touch, and then they spark and cause fires, as that's what I understand. So why this is happening, I don't think they're being designed properly. Of course, now I'm looking up the power lines all the time, which most of the time you just ignore them and you don't even see them. But it looks to me like the poles are very far apart. Some of these poles are a football field apart. And so you got these long stretches of bare wire, and these wires on these power systems, the high tension ones, they're just bare wires up there. They just run them like that. But I guess I don't know why they do that. One of the reasons, it might be cheaper to do it that way. Don't put insulation on these lines. But I think that if they put maybe in these areas where there is this high wind potential, certain areas with a lot of vegetation, they could put more poles in, and that would make these lines not swing so much, and they wouldn't come together and touch these bare wire high voltage lines. And that would be one thing that they might do. So what I'm saying is, it might be they've been cutting costs by putting as few poles as they can in. And that could be one thing that's going on here, possibly. Might be cheaper for PG&E, the electric company, power company, to cut our power off for a couple days when it's windy, rather than put in more poles or insulated wires or some other technology that would stop the system from catching fire and starting these fires. An analogy to that, designing for the worst case situation that you might encounter, would be like in automobiles. You don't see the manufacturers designing cars that can go 35 miles an hour when they know people are going to be on the freeways going 70, 80 miles an hour. So they design them to go 120 miles an hour so that 70 and 80 miles an hour is easily done, and the wheels aren't going to fall off going 70, 80 miles an hour, because they're designed to go 120, 150 miles an hour. They designed them to go 35 miles an hour, and they tried to go 60 and 70 on the freeways. Well, the wheels might fall off, the engine might blow up. So this is what we're dealing with. And it's like a Ferrari. It's designed to go 200 miles an hour. Well, of course, Ferraris are very expensive. So the more difficult circumstances you're going to design the system for, the more expensive it's going to be. And I think this is part of what's going on there. Of course, I've already brought that up, but it's a money thing. Designing a system that can handle more extreme conditions is more difficult, and it's more expensive. And that may be what's going on here too, and I think it is. So some might ask, well, how does this fit into the cost of a thing? Podcast's standard of living theme. That's what I talk about on here, is standard of living, and especially things that can lower our standard of living. Well, I think this is lowering our standard of living, because this is kind of like a third world power system here now, where they're just going to cut it off at will, and we can't do anything about it. One of the things about a power company is you want it to be reliable, and businesses need that as well as just regular, the residential customers. You want to depend on it, and it has been dependable over the years, except for, like I say, a storm that comes out and knocks out a power line, and then they're going to, within a day or so, they're going to fix that up and patch it back up in your area. But this is an intentional shutdown, so that is a standard of living lower than we had before now. And I'd say this is like they do in third world countries, where the power just goes off and they don't really know why. They say it's going to be because of fires here. Well, many of the other areas around here did not have the power off, and they had just as much wind. And that's another thing. How did they decide which areas they were going to shut the power off? Who knows? They're not telling us. But some of the big cities around here that actually get more wind, they got more trees, and they got pine trees in those areas, which are more flammable. They were not cut off. So I don't know how they figured it out, who to cut off, but somehow they did, and I think it's a little odd. So when something like this happens, the power system's not dependable anymore. It's a different way of thinking about things. You just can't depend on them. You've lost trust. It's just like in a bad relationship. When you lose trust, in a personal relationship, you lose trust in that person. The relationship then becomes a bad relationship. And when you lose trust in the power company, it becomes a bad relationship. So the PG&E now has a bad relationship with the people in California. They can't be trusted to deliver power reliably. I don't trust them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on I'm going to go more solar and probably more batteries right in my house so that when this happens again, I'll have a battery backup right in the house where all the outlets and lights in the house work and not have to depend on them. And then for the bigger systems like the air conditioning and heating, I will figure out a way to hook up my generator to run those in the event that power goes out. So I'm going to do some things to try to circumvent that, because I don't like that. It feels like they have a tyranny kind of over me, and I don't like to have that. I like to kind of control my own situation a little bit better than that. But, they caught us all off guard. I had no idea they'd try to pull this, and they did. And now I'm going to take action over the next 6 months or a year and make sure that, next time it happens, I'll be even better off than I was just by luck. This time, it's going to be but more than luck next time. And I would guess that the businesses around town and in the areas where this happened are going to do the same thing. They're going to have a backup system so they can still keep doing business. And that might be a good thing for everybody, because we can't depend on this power company to bring power in reliably anymore. They might decide to cut it off anytime for any reason. We don't want to live in fear that the power is going to go out. And if it does go out, we want to have a backup system that we can get by on without the power company. And luckily that exists now. We got pretty good battery technology. We got good solar panels, and they're relatively cheap. Basically, they pay for themselves if you have the money to put them in. It's well worth it to put it in anyway. I just haven't done it because I kind of procrastinate on that kind of thing sometimes. But this is going to give me a lot of motivation to actually do it. So, do I think PG&E is incompetent, negligent? Well, I do. This is a sign that they have very low confidence in their their distribution system. They must have very low confidence. They're shutting down hundreds of thousands of people. And hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, were shut down in this thing. And some of them are probably still out. They're probably still out. They're still checking the wires before they turn it back on. I understand. But, I can say that, but, I can't prove it. But it just seems that way to me by common sense, just general common sense. Now, they can investigate them and see if that is the case, that their systems are designed poorly. And they should be designed, like I said, for the worst conditions. Anybody can design something for the best conditions. That's easy, but it doesn't work. As soon as the conditions change a little out of that optimum condition, it doesn't work. And this seems to be the case with these power systems that they have. And it could be that they're putting power lines into new areas that are more difficult to get to and different terrains and things like that. That could be part of it. But the fact is they have to design those systems better and more robustly so that they can put up with the worst conditions that might come along weather-wise. Whether they have to put some of the power lines on the underground, or they might have to put them in pipes over the ground if they can't dig in the ground where there's too much rock or whatever. But again, it's money. It comes down to money. And that's probably what this whole thing boils down to, is money. It's cheaper for them to shut the power off than to fix their power systems. That's my suspicion, and that's what common sense tells me. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. I think I've gone on long enough about this. And thank goodness it's over. And there were no fires, but even then, there could have been fires started from all the tens of thousands of generators. All it takes is a gas line to blow on one of these old generators somebody's got and get down on the exhaust pipe, and there you got a fire from that. So I think the risk was actually higher with tens of thousands of generators has to be running during this time. I know most of the people around me had them going, and I had mine going some of the time. So, and then of course the risk from people barbecuing out back in the wind and stuff like that, because they couldn't cook inside, probably raised it. There's probably more risk from not having the power on than having the power on. Now, I'm glad there was no big fires. That's great, and at least we got through it without any real damage. But it is kind of a ripoff. It is a lowering of our standard of living. Now we can't depend on reliable electricity. We're going to have to spend money to have our own systems to back up against this now. And that's going to cost us money that we could have spent on something else, because we can't trust these guys. Thank you for listening in today. And until next time, this is Lloyd Holiday signing off.